right, everybody, it is time for everyone's favorite thing, which is an extremely unnecessary, pedantic debate about something that does not matter at all. Specifically, today we're going to try to do our best job of answering the question of who started metalcore. And by the way, before we get into that, I love these kind of like graphics, you know, that you used to find on like Tumblr and stuff like that. The collection of band logos where like half of them just like obviously make no sense. Metalcore, yeah, like Shadows Fall, Caliban, Lamb of God, As I Lay Dying, Bring Me the Horizon. Yeah, metalcore bands like Unearth, All That Remains. Oh, and also Korn, Nirvana, and Five Finger Death Punch. Also great metalcore bands. Nirvana, definitely my favorite metalcore band. But what got me originally thinking about this was this thread over here on Reddit, which is, as we know, when it comes to like pedantic debates about dumb shit that doesn't matter at all, Reddit is definitely the place to go for that. So naturally it makes sense that it started here. And so this is a thread from r/metalcore, which said, who do you think was the first true metalcore band? This person said, I would argue that it's Integrity, and here's why. They're part of the first 3 bands of metalcore. The other 2 bands are Converge and Earth Crisis. Between those 3 bands, Integrity was the first to be formed. The band was formed in 1988. Earth Crisis was in 89 and Converge was in 1990. Integrity was also the first of these 3 bands to actually release music. By the time Converge and Earth Crisis had begun to release music in 1992, Integrity had already put out their first studio album, For Those Who Fear Tomorrow, a year before that in 1991. So with that being said, do you agree with me? If not, then who do you think is the first true metalcore band and why? Well, let's get into it. It's Earth Crisis. Firestorm was the moment the crossover thrash genre evolved into metalcore. I actually disagree with this, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I don't agree with this, but first, let's just take a look here at what he's talking about. So it is true, and by the way, my good friend Ryan Downey, who you may know for writing for Alternative Press and doing lots of interviews with people like Ronnie Radke and Andy Biersack and stuff like this, he wrote a very good article about this, where Dwid from Integrity apparently told Ryan that he coined the term metalcore. Ryan said, I say that his band Integrity invented the genre. And so there's a lot of people kind of taking this direction, saying that it's Integrity, Converge, and Earth Crisis that invented metalcore. I don't agree with that. I'll explain why. So first, if you've not heard Integrity, this is from way back in 1991. This was back when metal and hardcore still weren't really friends. I mean, obviously there was like crossover thrash, but that's a different thing. This is from way back in 1991, and I would say Integrity probably were the first band to kind of combine this type of hardcore with, you know, a lot of elements of metal like solos and stuff like that. This is from back in 1991. I do agree with Ryan on that. I don't think it's very good. I think it's really bad, actually. But you can hear this is like Metallica meets hardcore, right? Then you got your chugs here. Just sounds like hardcore to me, very mid. Yeah, I agree with that. But let's give them credit where it's due. They were very early to this. Now, as far as Converge, Converge did start a long time ago. They started way back in 1991. But back in 1991, they weren't doing like Jane Doe, okay? So here's Converge's demo from 1991, which, you know, I'm guessing that nobody in the band would necessarily... let's put it this way. They don't play these songs anymore, but just so you know, this is what Converge sounded like back in 1991. Not amazing. Not amazing. Another band around this time that was very early to the metal and hardcore thing was Ringworm, also from Cleveland, which Frank from Integrity played guitar in this, and I'm pretty sure that Tony Pines, Chubby Fresh, played drums on this. So Ringworm and Integrity kind of sister bands. And here we go. I thought Ringworm was really good. For 1991, I think that's pretty cool. Kind of punky, thrashy. I also got tattooed. This tattoo here, the singer of Ringworm did this on me in like 1998, I think. I love this shit. I think Ringworm was awesome. The Ringworm demo was awesome. Cro-Mags had already done this years earlier though. Yeah, but this doesn't sound like Cro-Mags. If you think this sounds like Cro-Mags, Maybe you haven't listened to Cro-Mags. They don't sound like this. Then, of course, there's Earth Crisis, who I love. But I'll tell you why I don't agree with this. And I think Josh from Trustkill, an authority on metalcore, one of the people who really put the genre on the map, he also is of this opinion. He said the first real metalcore is exclusive to hardcore kids from the early 90s who added more metallic parts, i.e. solo singing metalcore production to hardcore songs. Earth Crisis, Vision of Disorder, Integrity, Overcast, Starkweather, Marauder, and Unbroken. Now, I don't agree with this. I love all these bands. Like, this is literally the shit I grew up on. I saw all these bands, or almost all of them, back in the day. I loved all of them. But the reason that I don't think this is metalcore, I think this is just hardcore. Meaning that these bands, for the most part, didn't really play outside of the hardcore scene. They culturally didn't really have, like, they were hardcore bands. They were hardcore bands that took influence from metal, and they didn't call themselves metalcore. It wasn't a different genre. They were just hardcore bands. Now, they most certainly laid the groundwork for all of the metalcore stuff to come, but I personally would not say that they were metalcore bands. There's also a lot of people, I noticed a lot of people said this. This person said, it doesn't completely fit the mold, but I always thought At the Gates was way ahead of their time with their sound. Pretty sure it inspired a lot of great metalcore bands. 100% true, but At the Gates is a melodic death metal band, not metalcore at all. It sounds like Hyper Pantera. Totally does. Zao also, another band, just really part of the hardcore scene, and also not great. Zao from back then, not that good. This was like Zao in 97. Not that good. Do you think metalcore starts more around Poison the Well? I kind of do. And so there's two parts of metalcore to me. There is a sonic aspect of it, meaning the fusion of metal and hardcore with things like solos and clean vocals and stuff like that. And then there is also a cultural component of it. These hardcore bands that were sort of pioneering the combination of metal and hardcore, for sure, sonically were kind of getting there, but culturally, they were just part of like hardcore. So to me, you can't really call them metalcore if they were just like bands playing hardcore shows. One band that sort of started to get there, this is from 1996, was Vision of Disorder, a band that a lot of people don't really talk about now, but I would say this is starting to get closer to sonically metalcore and also culturally metalcore, because VOD came from the hardcore scene, but they tried they always wanted to play with like metal bands and stuff like that. They pretty much like left the hardcore scene behind as soon as they possibly could. So I would say this is potentially an early contender. I think the difference is the cult of personality. Metalcore is less communal. I agree with that. Right off the bat, you have the clean vocals here, which in hardcore at the time was like not done at all. Like the only other band that did clean vocals at all was like Starkweather, and nobody knew who they were. I love this album. Sounds like grunge vocals. Yeah, it kind of does. Like Alice in Chains, yeah. And you start hearing some of this sort of like breakdown kind of stuff here. This came out in 96 on Roadrunner. You get sort of breakdowny kind of stuff here, which was... not too many people were doing this at the time. And again, VOD was trying very hard to like break out of the hardcore scene. So I would say, arguably, they were certainly one of the pioneers. Whether you want to call them metalcore or not, I suppose, is sort of up to you. I think they're a contender. Another band to talk about here, sort of starting in the late 90s is where I think it really started to come together. So Phil Labonte, who a lot of people may not know, one of the actual creators of metalcore, for sure. He was the original singer of Shadows Fall there from the very beginning. He said it's probably Overcast or Aftershock, the Killswitch Engage precursor bands, spawned all the bands we think of today as metalcore, and they were doing this sound in the early 90s. You might throw Shadows Fall in, but bands that were spiritually hardcore, I think, aren't metalcore, but that's just me. This is exactly what I think. I think it all started with these sort of, there's a handful of bands that sort of, spawned Killswitch Engage, Overcast, Aftershock, and I forget, Blood Has Been Shed was Howard's old band, right? I think that they were the ones that kind of started to lay the groundwork. And one of those, for example, back in the 90s, I was into hardcore, but I was also very into like, metal and stuff. And at the time, there were very, very, very few people in the hardcore scene that were into like real metal. Like maybe they liked Metallica and Slayer and stuff, but it was very rare for anybody in the hardcore scene to listen to any kind of like, you know, thrash metal that was any deeper than that. And nobody really was into death metal. Like one of the only people from the hardcore scene back then that I knew that was into like real metal was Mike Seatown, who you may know. He has like a YouTube channel now. He's on Dead End Hip Hop and stuff. And he was in a band called Dawn of Orion. He was like one of the most legit like metalheads in the hardcore scene back then. And I would say this is the first thing I heard out of the hardcore scene where I was like, oh shit, this sounds like real metal. This is Overcast. This is from 1994. The singer of this band, Brian, ended up in Shadows Fall, and the bassist, I think, Pete, ended up in Killswitch Engage. And you can hear how metal this was from 94. Metal as fuck from 94. It still has that hint of punk. Yeah, a little bit. You can hear how this was sort of, you know, the precursor to Shadows Fall for sure. This was my favorite song from the album. Still more hardcore than metal. I don't know. It's pretty fucking metal. Like, there's not a lot of hardcore in this. This just sounds like thrash metal to me. I don't hear really any hardcore here. Nobody was playing shit like this, like stuff that was this metal. This was even more metal than Earth Crisis at the time. And you could tell these were like legit metal dudes, not just like hardcore kids trying to play Metallica riffs. I was like, okay, these guys listened to a lot of fucking Slayer. What about bands like All Out War? Yeah, All Out War was around the same time. Yeah, they were very early. So 1993. Very, very, very early. I also got tattooed by the guitarist of All Out War in like 98. Very legit. But I think Phil's right. I think it's these bands, these sort of pre-Killswitch type bands. Aftershock also has to be mentioned in this conversation. Aftershock might be kind of the first band to really nail the sound. They really weren't around that long, and like nobody really knew who they were outside of sort of Massachusetts, I think. This is from, I think, 96, something like that, maybe 98. This might be kind of the first thing that sounds like metalcore as we know it. Like, this sounds like metalcore, right? You can hear Killswitch because it's Adam D. Yeah, and it had good production. One of the first bands to have good production in the scene. I remember hearing this at the time, and I was just like, wow, okay, nobody's done this before. Let's see when this came out. 99, okay. I mean, this sounds like metalcore, right? Barely sounds like hardcore, yeah. And the clean guitars. I would have to say that, like, it's probably Aftershock that really established the template for what we would call metalcore. Because, like, you listen to Earth Crisis or Integrity compared to this, and those bands are awesome, but they don't really sound like metalcore. They sound like hardcore. This sounds like metalcore, right? Like, nobody would listen to this and be like, oh, yeah, this is hardcore, right? This is like obviously a different thing. So I think that's my vote. However, another band that has to be mentioned in this conversation would be Poison the Well. This is from 1999, which, you know, if you think of metalcore as the combination of like chugs with clean vocals and, importantly, playing outside of the hardcore scene, I think that Poison the Well has to be mentioned. And they got the clean vocals coming in here, right here. And somehow or another, they did get a little bit of like MTV airplay and sort of made a little bit of like noise outside of the hardcore scene, but they did come from the hardcore scene. They were sort of making a little bit of noise there. So far, I think I would go with Aftershock as probably the first band to do like true metalcore, which then again, obviously spawned Killswitch, where Killswitch is definitely the band that put it on the map. But I think that Aftershock was probably the template for it. So I think that's my vote. Another band that comes up a lot as potentially inventing it is Atreyu. I don't think that's true at all. This is from 2002, which, by the way, that's several years after Poison the Well and Aftershock and Killswitch. This is what Atreyu was doing in 2002. So number one, a few years late. Number two, if you listen to this, I don't actually really think this sounds like metalcore per se. Also not good. Not good. Sounds like Thursday. Yeah, I agree with that. So Atreyu's next album, I think, was really good. But there's really no way you can say that they created metalcore. I don't know why they said that. I don't know why anybody else would say that, because this was years later, years after Aftershock, years after Poison the Well. I don't really see any way that they could sort of lay claim to that. But let's take a look at some of the other bands that people suggested here. Maybe I missed something. Let's see. We'll see what Reddit has to say. Integrity, Shai Hulud, Marauder, All Out War. Again, Marauder, All Out War, great bands, love them, but definitely from the hardcore scene. Shai Hulud, I would say sort of similar to Poison the Well, definitely influential, but I don't really think if you listen to Shai Hulud, I don't think you would hear metalcore in that now. Downcast and Rorschach, those are hardcore bands, definitely not metalcore at all. Great bands. Lots of people talking about like crossover, which again, I agree with this. I agree with this. This person says there's so many bands that could be that answer. Combining punk and metal has been a thing for so long at this point. However, when we're talking about what we've come to know as metalcore, Killswitch Engage's first record, I agree with that. Hear Me Out, before them, there's plenty of bands like Integrity, Earth Crisis, and before them, Biohazard and Suicidal Tendencies. But if you were around during Killswitch's rise, you know it was different. It was yes, absolutely different. It was like some things no one ever done before. It was clean, really well produced, but still hard as fuck with those breakdowns. Combined the At the Gates core with straight up Hatebreed-esque breakdowns with soaring choruses. 24 years later, and most of those bands just took Killswitch's formula and adapted it. Still to this day, totally true. Killswitch came out and about a million other bands jumped on the train. I know it's not really the first metalcore band, but I would argue they're the first to make metalcore what it is today. Seriously, go listen to their first record. It still sounds phenomenal to this day. I agree with that. And again, I think if you listen to Aftershock, you can very clearly hear this is the foundation for Killswitch, right? So there it is, people. That's my answer. Killswitch, the band that definitely put it on the map. But if you were to ask me who is the band that sort of established the foundation for that, the first band that you could listen to and you'd listen to be like, yes, that's metalcore, not like proto-metalcore or hardcore that sounds like metalcore, but like actually sounds like metalcore, it's Aftershock. That's my take. And I look forward to hearing Reddit disagree with me. Nirvana, definitely my favorite metalcore band.